throwing several lightning bolts out at you guys. So hopefully there's something you guys can take, digest it, process it, and then put it back into your own life, your own art, however applicable. All right. So some of us are born weird. Some of the artists are born weird. We've got talents just filling to the brim, but then other practical things just kind of just fall to the wayside. Absent-minded, the weird artist that has their own home studio. There's lots of us out there. Like I was saying, my name is Michael Vieira. I'm an American painter. I was born in Lowell, and Lowell has actually become my muse, which is very interesting because I was born there. For my whole life, I kind of avoided the idea of the city and cityscapes. I fell into still life painting and portrait painting because it was very challenging, and I love that. I kind of eat that up. So anyway, I wanted to show you guys, here's my little friend. I got a little bug here, so if you see a bug fly away, it's a temple. So I guess I'll just pass it along. So mostly, that little painting, I just want you, the painting's not that great, so please don't talk about how amazing it is, because it's not. But what I want you guys to notice is flip it over, and that's linen. Some of you guys, I feel like the materials might hold some of you guys back. So if you use like high quality Dutch linen, like oil prime linen, and you use like artist grade paint or something a little bit better than student grade, you're going to notice you're not fighting the materials anymore, especially oil prime linen. Because I'll do like the 4x4s at the brush gallery, and the first thing I do is rip that canvas off and put a piece of linen on there. Because it's just, the tooth is smoother, and the oil paint just kind of sits on there, and you can kind of move it a little bit. You're not fighting the materials. And so, just keep passing that around. But really do pay attention to just the materials I use. Because that's usually what breaks my bank, is the materials. Like a big roll of linen's like $600. I mean, I'll have it for like a year, but. And also stretch it too. If you flip it over, you notice how I stretched it, because that's just really cheap. But I'm a graduate from the Museum School of Fine Arts in Boston. And I went there in the 90s, which was actually pretty amazing. And I didn't realize how amazing it was until I showed up, a decade later. And first thing I used to do, I would go into the bathrooms, because the bathrooms are just full of just poetry, like in the stalls, and just crazy drawings and stuff like that. And then I don't know if anyone's ever been to the museum school back then, but now it's just like Cornian tile, recessed lighting. Like, if someone writes on the wall, they're going to get suspended. And it's you almost take away that guerrilla art kind of mentality out of it. And I'm like, well, the painting studio upstairs, that bathroom still has to be a mess, because we have like a mirror that people will draw like on the wall and reflect the mirror, so people see all the time. Perfectly clean. It was really disappointing. But the thing that the museum school did teach me, though, was the ability to appreciate everything and expose me to things I would have never been exposed to. Even performance art. So performance art, you never know what you're going to walk into, right? So you get this guy, he's like gently dipping his testicles into glitter, and you're sitting there you're like, yeah, that's pretty nuts. So I mean, so that was my joke, sorry. But seriously though, that didn't happen. But seriously, the museum school, you had so much freedom that you were able to commune with your muse, which could also be it could also be a problem, because we didn't have attendance, we didn't have grades. What we did have was a review board at the end of each semester, and that was very grueling. It's like an hour of sitting there with 2 faculty and 2 students, and then you have all your body work up, everything you've done for the year. And you talk about it, you talk about what you went through, your struggles and stuff like that. And a lot of people can tell if you did it all within a week, because there's no breakthroughs, there's no struggles, you can almost see it. And it's very interesting, because I've witnessed that, people kind of phoning it in, faking it. So we had this saying, the museum school gives you so much rope, that if you're not careful, you'll hang yourself with it. And it's absolutely true because, like, the most important, I think the most important lesson I got from the MSF, the most important lesson I got from that SNF day was self-discipline. Because we didn't have attendance, so no one checked in on me. We didn't have grades, so it wasn't like I have to turn this in or I'm not going to pass. There was none of that. But if you didn't do it for school, you're not going to do it for yourself when it actually matters. When it, when you're just, oh, no, I'm going to go do something else today. I'm not going to paint today. And that keeps happening. There was this thing Paul used to say that daily activity is like an old man's beard. You can cut it all back, but it's all going to be there the next day. So might as well just paint it instead. But so the museum school, I learned to look at everything around me as art or as potential beauty. And I would look within the ugly things to find beautiful things. And I would try to uplift it. And then we had this amazing class. It was called Art as a Process. And that pretty much kind of broke you into the school and the way of thinking. And there were, we redefined things like drawing, and we redefined art materials. So the one lesson we had, a drawing class we had, was we had plaster and we carved into little balls, and then we laid a sheet of tar paper that we put on the roof for roofing, and we would just we'd make marks, and so it would be white streak marks across black paper. And their idea of drawing is like a horse drawing a carriage, a pencil drawing across the surface of a piece of paper. That was their definition of drawing. But I learned things like I noticed, there's a piece in here that's aluminum foil, and they over there,
Christmas tree back there.
Yes, and the Christmas tree, and that's something that we would also all explore. You don't have to go to an art store to buy art supplies. You can go to a hardware store and buy that. You can look around, found objects. But another thing, because there was no majors, you can follow your muse around. So if you wanted to draw better, you should take a sculpting class. A lot of film students would take painting classes. And painting is very interesting because painting, it's you can tell, it's pretty much the end of the movie, a painting. You can tell the whole plot happens. And with film, it's very linear. I fell into the wood shop. That's a lot of times. I was kind of going between the ceramic studio and the painting studio, and then I'd spend a lot of time in the wood shop, just because I just loved that, the smell and the people there. Another thing, so I wrote here, poor Ryan. Heroin was a big problem. There was this up-and-coming artist, and he had shows, he had pretty big shows, and he came from a very affluent family in Florida. And I used to hang out with him, and everybody was like, oh my God, you know Ryan, that's so cool. I'm like, yeah, we'll just hang out. And then one day he's like, hey Mike, you wanna try heroin? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, man. No, I'm sorry. It's because he grew up in an affluent area. He didn't get to see what drugs did to people, and I did. I was in Lowell. I was around during the crack epidemic. And so I had the perspective he didn't have. And I don't know what he's doing now, but what I wanted to do for all of us is just to have a moment of silence, because I know all of us have been touched by addiction. And I just want to have a moment of silence just for a minute. And when I saw Brian, I thought of this later, Ryan, there but for the grace of God go I. And that's just very true, because I could have easily done that too. I could have easily said, I want to fit in with this guy, because everybody likes him. He's an up-and-comer, it's all this stuff, and I want to be associated with him. But I knew, it was one of those things where I'm like, wow, you don't understand, you don't see your path, but I couldn't, because I was outside looking at it. Yeah, so that was the hard one. And then after graduating, I followed my muse. I traveled, I taught art, but then I hit a plateau. I noticed a lot of my work was I didn't put people in it. Things were kind of simplified things a little bit too much. And And I realized I was just kind of relying on my primitive talents that I learned when I was young. From a great artist, Dan Gaudette. I don't know if you guys know Dan Gaudette. He just recently retired, but a lot of the stuff I learned from him as a child, I realized I was relying on that when I'm making art at the present moment. And then, if you want to sharpen yourself, you need to rub up against something harder than you. That's the only way to sharpen yourself. So I became an apprentice under Paul Ingerson for 6 years. And it was very structured. We started with life drawing and worked our way through. And Paul, one of the very first things Paul would say is art is like a beautiful butterfly flying around, just the majestic, just the way it flutters. And what we do is we catch that butterfly. We kill that butterfly, we put a pin in that butterfly, we put the butterfly against the wall, and we copy that butterfly exactly. Because what Paul's teaching us is the grammar of how to talk about art. We kill that art because we want to learn, we don't want to dissect it. So because of that, I think Paul didn't want people to be all like experimental. He really wanted to teach you the grammar of what you're learning. And so anyway, some of that, this is kind of, I think a lot of people want to hear this. So a lot of the things I learned from Paul, because you call them secrets, but they're really not. I mean, they're secrets because you need to do them for you to own it. So one of the important things, I have no idea about this, is north light. North light, I don't know if you guys paint with natural light at all, but if you have northern exposure, you never turn the lights on. You've got steady light all day. Like right now in my studio, I have a southern exposure. So there's a point where it's so bright in my studio that I have to wear sunglasses, which I can't do because I'm painting. So I just need to slide everything around, and thankfully I'm working from photos right now. But if I was working from a still life, I couldn't do it with a still life because I'd be chasing the shadows. So north light was very important, which is something I never realized. And then also another one, so it's kind of dumb, limit your palette. Limit your palette. I paint with 7 colors. I paint with, let's see, I can just right off the top of my head. Black, alizarin, cadmium red, cadmium lemon, viridian, titanium white, French ultramarine. Yeah, and then sometimes I'll use, my favorite color, viridian, and that's it. And sometimes I'll add other colors, and it's kind of like a spice rack. You know what I mean? You don't want to throw curry into everything. So you save the curry for things later, So I got, quinacridone red. Like I'll save that for like the really nice purple stuff. A black mirror, any kind of mirror. But I mentioned black mirrors because we all have them in our pockets. All our cell phones. It's a black piece of glass. I don't know where my black mirror is, but you could do things like you could look, like that, look behind you. You could do this and see everything upside down. So there's different ways of using a mirror. And all you're doing pretty much is just giving yourself a fresh eye, something you haven't seen. Because you become blank here in work. You stare at it all day. You don't see it. Another big thing I learned from Paul, too, was standing back from your work. So for instance, this is a still life painting I have here. This one I actually did in Texas. It's kind of damaged now. But the way I would do this is I would have my actual still life set up right next to it. And I would have my paint and palettes right here. And the whole time I'm painting from a distance. I walk onto the painting, I'll make a little mark, I walk back, and then I compare side to side if it's doing the same effect, has the same glow, has the same color. And if not, I adjust it or light it. But the whole time I'm painting here. And it was just kind of funny because we were in a mill building, and people downstairs like, oh, what do you guys do all I hear is you guys walking around all day, just walking. I'm like, we're painting. You guys paint while you're walking. That's what we do. Just walking around all day. Let's see. Oh, another one. Top and bottom. This is crazy. Paul took away a bunch of problems just by telling me to do that. So if I was to mark my top and my bottom and never move them, all my issues are widths. That's all width issues now. So if something looks too fat, it's because I have it too. Oh, if something looks too short, it's because I have it too wide. If it looks too tall, it's because I have it too thin. So so it kind of takes half your problem away. But you have to be disciplined and not with your top and bottom. It doesn't have to be top and bottom, you can do the sides. You going all about the paint, the whatever the widest proportion is. Another one, oh my God, this to this, that to that. That one took me a little while too. This to this, that to that. So I will do something, I'll paint something correct to itself. So I paint the eye. The eye looks amazing, except it's too big, or it's in the wrong location, or it's too high, or it's too low, or whatever it is, it's not correct to the rest of the painting. So whenever you make a mark, you're always like this mark to this mark, and then that mark to that mark, and then you look at in relation. So you're always drawing something for the sake of something else. That one took me a while. Another good one, shadows are flat. R.H. Isaac Gamble. Shadows are flat, but flat in a hat. Or they're called the bed bug line too. And that's another one. That's another one that saves a lot of problems. Is you can just soften those shadows, because if you start putting all these crazy details in the shadows, it'll take away from the grand power of the piece. You know what I mean? Our eyes pretty much look at the lens anyway. So you can step those shadows down, you can kind of smooth them out, and plus saves so much time with just flattening that stuff up instead of getting sucked into the shadow parts. So another one Paul would say is like, how do you break a bundle of sticks? It was one stick at a time. It's the only way to do it. You couldn't break the whole bundle. You have to do one stick at a time. And so anytime we're faced with just daunting, like, oh, there's just too much pattern in this thing. It's like, well, how are you going to break a bundle of sticks? Yeah. The other thing we'd say is how do you eat an elephant? One spoonful at a time. Mostly the studio mates would do this, but we would say like, oh, remember how much fun it was painting that hand? Like, yeah. He's like, well, it's no wrong spot. You have to paint it again. But so that'll come in my head a lot. Remember how fun it was to paint that? And it'll kind of soften the blow myself a little bit. Another one's always ask for a fresh eye. A fresh eye. So you start looking at your work all day, and you stop seeing it. It's kind of like a writer, they need an editor, so they can kind of look at your stuff and be like, oh, where did this character come from? Oh, that's his brother. Oh, you never mentioned that. You know, so you always want, even bringing a child in, they can go and be like, oh, those legs are too long. Or it's like, oh, that looks too dark. You know, and just take it, because that's a fresh eye. That was somebody that didn't look at your piece, and that was their initial reaction. So that's a very important one. Even just driving somebody out. Here's another one. Actually, I was reviewing my old, I did a lecture like 15 years ago for the Chelmsford Art Society. It was actually a critique, a lot of work, but there was something I said there, and I'm going to repeat it again, is because it's very important. Drawing is so important that it comes last. That is the last thing you worry about is drawing. Because when people hang on to their drawing in the beginning, everything suffers. Everything suffers. The colors aren't as vivid as they should be. The values aren't as brave as they should be. Now, if you just blindly said, there's a big field of red here, and it turns to purple. You know, this is like a yellow, and it shades. You know, and if you just think of it absent-mindedly, and don't be clever. Don't be like, okay, this is the tablecloth, this is the edge of a tomato, or whatever. Don't do that. Just be like, this is where that color meets that color. You keep doing that, and then you step back, and you just keep correcting, and don't think of the objects. It'll all fall into place. But like drawing, so for instance, the way I used to describe it would be like a royal feast. So the first people that show up are the people that clean the hall. They go and sweep everything up, clean everything out, and then another crew of people come in and start setting up all the tables and chairs. And then you have all the guests show up, all the guests start showing up, and they all get seated. And then you've got the prominent, important guests, you know, the dukes and duchesses, and they all make their entrance and stuff. And the very end is the king and queen. You don't want them in the beginning. You don't want them getting dirty. You don't want the wine to spill on them. You don't want food falling on them while they're setting things up. You want them last. So you got all these beautiful colors together, and at the end, you're going to start kind of opening things up and pushing it together and making the drawing happen. But by then, you have all the beautiful colors. You have all the beautiful, you know, you have the soft edges, the hard edges. So another one, Paul, coming out of the fog. That was probably trademarked by him, and that was so revolutionary. That was probably more revolutionary than all the abstract artists ever going on. And basically, it's simple enough. Everything's out of focus. You just paint everything all fuzzy. And then you start to look for the high, calls them high readers. So if you're driving, you're like, what is that up ahead? You know what I mean? You're like, oh, that's a fence. Oh yeah, oh, there's a mailbox. Oh, there's a house. You know, you start to see things the closer you get to it. And that's kind of the same thing with drawing so important, comes last. you put all the colors, all the shapes in there, and you're coming out of the fog. You know, it's like, oh, that black and white edge, I can see that real clear. So I go in that edge, and that leads the painting. Yeah, Paul, I'm sure Paul, he must have covered that. And then also too, Paul would get frustrated at me, and like everyone would be like, oh, Paul, you know, like, oh, Mike, you're Paul's favorite. I'm like, I don't know, I used to get him mad all the time. And one thing he would say to me is like, you realists are all the same. You're just painting things. He's like, you have to paint the effects. He's like, I want to see the effect of that happening. Stop painting that thing. And that, of course, took me a while to kind of understand, you know. He's like, open up this passage and paint this part first, you know, instead of painting that shine, you know. And I still fall to that habit because I do that all the time. Another big one too. Every morning we walk into the studio, stare in front of the piece and say, if I was to drop dead right now, what am I going to regret not doing on this painting? And that's what you work on first. That is what you work on first, because ultimately you should be able to sell it even if you're dead. Like, oh, yeah. You know, they can tell what you were going for, and they oh, it's an unfinished painting. But so yeah, so first thing in the morning, you know, what are you going to regret not finishing? Finish that first. Also, I think the best way to learn, and if you guys feel you're on a plateau, is to work from life. Always work from life, because that's going to give you the camera lies to you. It doesn't give you the right colors. And also with you too, because you have to learn yourself, like always in the same spot, everything's always the same, and you just work for it, because it's a lot harder, because you're taking a three-dimensional object and you're translating it to a 2D object. So it's kind of a challenge, but you learn a lot. And then when it comes time to actually doing a piece, it's already like memory bank in your head. So Mr. Hunter, it's funny, I have a microphone, I'm not using it. You guys can all hear me, right? Okay, good. So Robert Douglas Hunter, I don't know if you guys know Mr. Hunter. He was another Boston school painter. He passed away 2014. But I would sit with him all the time during the openings of the Guild of Boston Artists in Boston. I would sit with him, and we'd be talking about art. And he said this one thing to me. He's like, if you're having a hard time with something, just paint it out and paint it right back in again. I guarantee you it's going to look better. I guarantee you. And I took that to heart. I was like, oh, Mr. Hunter here, you know. And of course, it always worked. Every time I just paint it up, paint it back in. Like, oh, that's so much. And I found out later he says it to everybody. But it's okay, because I really, really listened to him, and I took it for myself. Okay, well, this is, take a little break here. I just want to show you guys a video. I just have to leave this up.